Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the channel. And should Coach Cristobal be held to the same second-year standard as the elite coaches in college football have set before him? What margin of victory should the University of Georgia beat TCU by? Will Daryl Jackson actually come back to the Miami Hurricanes after pledging to the Florida State Seminoles? And seeing as that it's 2023, I thought what better time than now to look back on what was actually our best team over the past decade. Right. So let's start at the top. This is my list of elite coaches in no particular order after Nick Saban. So obviously we got Nick Saban first. We got Kirby Smart, got Lincoln Riley, got Jim Harbaugh, got Ryan Day, got Dabo Swinney, and rounding out that list for me is drum roll, Brian Kelly. Yeah, Brian Kelly. I have to put Brian Kelly above Jimbo Fisher, even though Jimbo Fisher has a national championship. And I believe that the reason should be obvious. Jimbo Fisher left Florida State in a terrible, terrible position, and he has not actually done anything with the amount of talent that he's amassed at Texas A&M that makes it seem like this is the same coach that was coaching the Florida State Seminoles when they were the team of the ACC, right? So I think Brian Kelly has surpassed him, even though Brian Kelly does not have that national championship. And I'm gonna tell you why I do that for Brian Kelly. Aside from a couple of years, I think Brian Kelly has just had a cast of characters at the quarterback position, but even with those cast of characters, he's Notre Dame has been competitive. He's taken Notre Dame to as far as Notre Dame can actually go, in my particular opinion. National championship game in 2012 was a game away from playing for another national championship in 2018, but obviously you ran into Alabama yet again. But aside from that, I think that Brian Kelly's just a good football coach, man. I just I just think he's one of the elite coaches. I think just being able to keep your team competitive when the most important position on the field is not necessarily as good as your counterparts, which is the quarterback position, right? So, with that being said, Dabo Swinney and Brian Kelly, they did not have the same second years that a Nick Saban, Lincoln Riley, Kirby Smart, Ryan Day, and Jim Harbaugh had, because respectively, Brian Kelly went 8-5 in his second year at Notre Dame, and Dabo Swinney went 9-4 in his second year at Clemson, right? So, just going through the list just for a historical, preference. Nick Saban's second year lost to a very, very loaded University of Florida team in 2008, led by Urban Meyer and Tim Tebow and Percy Harvin. Kirby Smart in 2018, his second year, ended up losing to a very, very good Alabama team in a national championship game. Lincoln Riley ended up losing to Kirby Smart in 2018. Again, very talented Georgia Bulldog football team, and probably what many will say is the absolute best first round of the playoff game in this early tenure of the playoffs. Jim Harbaugh wins double digit games. Ryan Day goes 13-1 in his second year, right? And even to Coach Cristobal's credit, he went 12-2 in his second year at the University of Oregon, right? So it's it's probably good to say that we should expect a jump. Now, should we expect a 12-2 jump? Should we expect? I mean, or should we look at a jump in the realm of what Dabo Swinney and Brian Kelly did? Could we be looking at an 8-5 team? Could we be looking at that, right? But to me, I feel like that we should expect more than that, but I don't want to get my hopes up. That's why I'm staying grounded. I have my bet hedged at 6-6 because I don't think we're gonna go less than 6-6, and I feel like we should win at the very least 6 games, and anything above that is just simply icing on the proverbial cake, right? So, with that being said, I think is very interesting to look at this because what you have on the flip side is you have guys that had good second years, but it ended up being fool's gold. So who are some of those guys that had that fool's gold? Oh, Will Muschamp. Will Muschamp went 11-2 his second year at the University of Florida, ended up getting beat by a very, very good Louisville team. Tom Herman at Texas in his second year. I think that clip is still floating around somewhere on the internet. And I don't remember the quarterback's name, but you got him out there saying Texas is back, and Texas was not back. Texas was Texas was not back, right? Gene Chizik, Gene Chizik in his second year, um, was blessed enough to get Cam Newton, goes and win a national championship. And Gene Chizik never sniffs anything close to that ever again and was subsequently fired and now was the defensive coordinator for probably the worst defense in the ACC when we think about the talent that they had on that particular team, and that was the North Carolina um, Tar Heels, right? So, obviously, I don't think that Coach Cristobal will venture over into Gene Chizik, Will Muschamp land, but I do think that it's fair for us as Hurricane fans to say that, hey, in order to get to that elite status, especially right now, because one of the things that Coach Cristobal has working for him that Saban, Kirby, Dabo, Brian Kelly, Ryan Day, and even Jim Harbaugh did not have on their side, and that is the transfer portal. None of those guys had the transfer portal. What they did was is they had to recruit and get guys however they could get them. Obviously, still having a team full of guys that were from the previous regime, of course. And I don't think any other coach probably was set up better than Lincoln Riley and Ryan Day. So obviously, of course, they're there by default. You know, in many respects. And I don't think either one of them are as strong of a recruiter as Coach Cristobal is. So obviously, I do think that we should expect that. But if we don't get it, we should not be disappointed, right? So just kind of getting off of the facetious fence of 6-6, I do think that it should be most Kane fans should feel comfortable with saying we should win 8 games next year, right? But I'm not making any expectations, right? I'm not doing it. I'm just gonna stay at my little 6-6 and hedge my bet, right? So that's that. But let me know what you guys think. Do you think it should be held to that same elite second year standard that some of the elite coaches have been held to? And even again, without Brian Kelly and Dabo Swinney having that big second year, even still, 8 wins. So that at least shows that we're kind of going in the kind of in the right direction. But you guys let me know. Now, how bad should Georgia beat TCU? Vegas has the over under, well not the over under, but they have the spread at 12.5, I believe, right? So, what's interesting about this is because I did a video, and for any of my new subscribers, I would implore you to please go back and look at some of my old videos, comment, do all that. I love to engage and talk about that. But one particular video that I want y'all to, well, I can't even think about what video it was. But on one particular video, I said the transfer portal is going to separate the coaches from the recruiters. And I think this national championship game is going to epitomize that down to the T. Because what you have is the Georgia Bulldogs, who I think got maybe, 2 transfers. And then you have the TCU Horned Frogs, who I believe brought in 14, maybe 16 some players, something like that. It wasn't too many more than what we brought in. And they're playing for the national title. Now, going back to what I just said, the transfer portal is going to separate the coaches from the recruiters. So obviously in this particular dynamic, obviously Kirby Smart is going to be the recruiter and Sonny Dykes is the coach. So with the spread set at 12.5, I feel like that Georgia needs to win by that in order to continue to validate this blue chip ratio. And for those who don't follow recruiting, which I don't follow recruiting like that, but we've heard about the blue chip ratio. The blue chip ratio essentially is this. This is the theory of the blue chip ratio. The higher number of your players that are blue chip guys, which are 4-star guys and higher, the better chance that you have at not only contending for a national championship, but also winning a national championship, right? So I think that, and this is just me, and this could just could be me being somewhat pessimistic or me just being somewhat dismissive of what's going on in terms of Georgia football. But I think aside from a catastrophic injury, and I'll be the first to say this, we cannot blame any officials because at this particular point, what we saw in the first 2 playoff games, they're going to miss calls. I most notably remember watching the Ohio State and um, Georgia game. There were a massive amount of holds that were just simply not called. So I don't know if they're going to let that free range go in the TCU versus Georgia game. I don't know, but if they do, you can't complain about that. The only thing that I feel like will be a valid excuse if there's a catastrophic injury on either side of the team that prevents them from being at the as healthy as they can be. Obviously, of course, we know Georgia has some injuries, but I think if this comes down to a single possession game, I think if Georgia wins this game by say a field goal, then I think my point is somewhat validated. That you have a good coach who was able to take some transfers, and I don't know how many of those transfers are actually playing significant minutes, but it's just the fact that they have one of the teams that brought in quite a few transfers, and they went toe to toe with arguably the second or best or most talented team. Now, of course, Georgia fans will probably say, "Hey, we just had the most players drafted in the modern era. I think they had 17 guys drafted in the last draft. So we lost a lot of talent, right? We lost a lot of talent. But give me a break. Y'all replace that. Not the experience. Obviously, you can't replace experience. But from a talent to talent perspective, you've replaced it, right? And obviously TCU is nowhere near in that particular spectrum in terms of talent, right? So I think that to me, I feel like that if Georgia does not beat TCU by that 12 and a half or more points, and I'll say nine, right? I'll say nine. I'll go down to nine. I feel like if Georgia does not beat TCU by two possessions, then I think that we could very well see a situation where, hey, if we got a good coach that's matching up against a recruiter, I think we should maybe like our odds. I don't, and to be honest, even though I'm going for TCU, I don't know if Max Duggan can be efficient enough against the Georgia defense to actually pull this out because it was some plays that he didn't make or some plays that were just some bad plays that we saw against Michigan that I think that that maybe that's just who he is, right? And I don't know if that'll be enough to overcome Georgia. And obviously Stetson Bennett, didn't play the very best against Ohio State, but um, he'll probably play better, right? He'll probably play better. Max Duggan will probably play better as well, but I think um, he has a ceiling, right? And obviously, we don't have enough. We won't have the excuse of Georgia is sleepwalking in this particular game because I think the Ohio State game woke them up, and I think TCU beating Michigan should woke them up even more. So we should have a very very focused and dialed in University of Georgia Bulldog team. And if they go out there and they beat them by the spread of 12 and a half, or in my thing, two possessions, then I think the blue chip ratio still, is still something valid that we can go by. But if this comes down to a situation like against Alabama and Texas, where it's just one player, we remember to play Bryce Young, dead to rights, sidesteps the defender and gets a first down, preserves the game for Alabama to win, then I think that, yeah, the talent can only get you so far. And it's gonna and you're in when you're depending solely on the talent to make a play like that, to me I think that shows that you've got outcoached. Now, I don't think the obviously I think the margin from talent to talent from TCU and Georgia are a lot bigger than the margin of talent from Texas and Alabama. So I don't want you to think that I'm comparing Texas talent to TCU or Alabama's talent to Georgia, even though Alabama and Georgia have similar talent. But Texas and TCU do not, from a composite standpoint, right? So let me say that from a composite standpoint, does not have the same amount of talent as the University of Texas has, right? So moving on. So it seems to just be a rumor right now that Darrell Jackson may actually come back to the University of Miami. Seems to be a lot of varying opinions about the young man. I'll start by saying if he wants to come back, great. I will welcome Darrell Jackson back, a young man that was just a true sophomore last year. And regardless of the situation, I do think that this will be his last year if he stays at Florida State or if he comes down to Miami. Even though I think Florida State has a better defensive line rotation right now because they had some guys that decided and opted to come back, get a little bit more work with Odell Haggins. So he may or not come back. But obviously, I think if he comes back to Miami, barring injury, I think he leaves and goes to the draft. But if he stays at Florida State, I think he probably will end up staying 2 years because he may want to get um, that shine time, so to speak. But I'm just gonna say this because I'm not gonna stay on this particular subject too long. Some people are saying, "Well, man, you've gone to the enemy. You've gone to the enemy. You go to Florida State." And I sit back and I think I say, man, it's nothing wrong with thinking that, right? There's nothing wrong with thinking that. But it's just at this particular time, man, I've come to that realization that the guys don't look at the rivalry the same way. They don't look at that rivalry the same way as we look at it, right? And it's one of them situations where it's like, okay, we're gonna fight like heck to beat each other on the football field, but then after the game, man, we're gonna hang out, right? Um, so I just kind of look at it like that. Obviously, for crying out loud, we had to transfer a quarterback from his name skip misses me right now. Brock Berlin came from the University of Florida, ended up probably being one of our better quarterbacks, right? So uh, I mean, it is. I mean, it is what it is. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna get into that because I know some people that gets them stirred up, right? But I don't necessarily look at it. I don't necessarily look at it like that. And the reason I don't look at it like that is because I'm a fan of NFL teams. And I told somebody that on the message board. I said I can't be saying that I dislike every player from Notre Dame. I'm a Raiders fan. Tim Brown went to Notre Dame, so I'm not supposed to like Tim Brown because he went to Notre Dame. Like I can't do that, right? I respect good players. I liked Ted Ginn. I don't know if I told y'all that, but Ted Ginn, uh, when I was in high school and Ted Ginn was at Ohio State, Ted Ginn was my favorite college football player. Just it's just I mean that's just what it is, right? So that's kind of how I look at things, you know what I mean? But it is what it is. And lastly, which team has been the best team in the past decade? I'm going with the 2013 team. I'm going with the 2013 team. And just for obvious reasons. I think that was the best offensive line that we had in terms of just production because all five guys ended up actually playing time in the NFL, highlighted by Eric Flowers actually going in the first round. Obviously, Duke Johnson. Stephen Morris probably is not the best quarterback if I had to make a trade. I feel like obviously if Brad Kaya could have been in that situation, then I think we're really talking about a team that probably really, really could have did some things because of the offensive weaponry that we had. And obviously, I know most people don't, remember because we look at Mark D'Onofrio as being the worst coordinator that has ever graced the Miami Hurricanes sideline. But the 2013 defense, I believe, at the conclusion of the year, was a top 15 defense. I believe it was ranked 13th. Obviously, we did not have a lot of sacks and tackles for losses, but I think we were the 13th ranked overall defense. So I think that bodes very, very well in terms of the other opposition that we have. Obviously, the teams that I would put up there would obviously be the 2016 Canes, of course, the 2017 Canes. I would venture to put the 2020 Canes up there, but other than that, I don't necessarily see um, any other particular teams. Maybe maybe we could say maybe the 2014 Canes. And the reason I say that is maybe if we would have gone with Ryan Williams instead of Brad, maybe we could have won some more games. But obviously, Golden opted to go with the rebuild, so he opted to go with Brad Kaya. But I think the 2013 team was probably the best team that we had, offensively as well as defensively. And another thing that really sticks out to me about that particular team is that when we played Florida State, James Winston didn't beat us. The run game beat us. James Winston didn't beat us because Deion Bush as well as Rashawn Jenkins both had interceptions in that particular game. And going into halftime, I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I felt like, man, we about to about to beat Florida State. And the second half came, and Florida State did to us what they ended up doing to everybody else that season, just blowing people out by wide margins. But I do think that team was able to contain Jameis Winston a lot better. Because he was having a historic season that particular year, and our defense was able to humble him. But obviously, Devontae Freeman humbled us because he took great pleasure in running through Miami Hurricane defenses because we did not want him to be a Hurricane until very, very late in the process, right? So he took that aggression out on us. But as always, man, it's about the you, man. Like, share, subscribe, and comment. And I'm out.